The article is titled "American Supermax Prisons Do Torture," and I start right off reminding people that Barack Obama stated, quote unquote, very clearly, "We don't torture." Well, yes, we do. And it's been proven, and enough expert opinion is documented, that human beings are social creatures, and prolonged isolation is in fact torture. And that is that's been an understanding that is universal. It's documented in treaties governing the treatment of prisoners, in covenants, and in the Constitution, where even the Constitution, I think it's Article 6, that talks about prison being a place of rehabilitation, reform and rehabilitation. So it is not a place where prisoners are brought to be tortured. One of the most egregious cases I point to, well, two actually. One is that of Mumia Abu-Jamal, and who is on death row, and the prison he's in is a Supermax. And he's on death row and has been on death row for 27 years with the added torment of a death sentence hanging over his head. When is the next death warrant going to be signed? He already endured the kind of excessive solitary treatment that occurs when a death warrant is signed. It becomes 24-hour watch, and the conditions are even more draconian. So he suffered through two of those. Now, and of course, may I remind you that 51 members of the British Parliament, 73 of the Danish Parliament, heads of state like former President, French President Mitterrand, Nelson Mandela, former President of South Africa, and many, many other highly respected jurists, legislators, artists, professionals have called for a new trial for Mumia, noting clearly that he did not get a fair trial. In fact, some attorneys have said he didn't get a trial at all. You couldn't even call it a trial. So, and the judge in that case came right out and said, quote unquote, and that was a notarized statement from a stenographer who overheard the judge say it, "I'm going to help him fry the nigger." Now, that should have been grounds alone for a new trial, needless to say. Then the second most egregious case that I know of, and I'm sure there are others, the case of the Angola 3 is pretty horrible. But the case of Hugo Pinel, he has been in prison now in California, and he's a brother I'm familiar with, and have been corresponding off and on since 1973, more consistently over the last 20 years. And he is doing his 45th year in California prisons, has not been convicted and sentenced for murder, but for assault of 2 prison guards in the case of the San Quentin 6, which came about as a result of the events of August 21st, 1971, when our comrade brother, Black Panther Field Marshal, I should say, was murdered on the yard of San Quentin. And 6 brothers caught the case because there 3 guards and 2 inmate turnkeys were also killed that day. The person who actually committed the murder, was convicted of, I should say, convicted of murder, was Johnny Spain, and he was released in 1988. So why would they continue to keep Hugo Pinel, also known as Yogi Bear, for a total of about 40 years in solitary confinement? The last nearly 20, he went in 1990 in the Pelican Bay SHU, and that is a monster prison. I've been there, and it's a solid concrete block, the SHU, what they call the SHU, Security Housing Unit, with only doors. And there are absolutely no windows. I mean, the animal rights people would raise hell if you put dogs and cats in a place like that. No natural light at all. And they are in their cells 24/7, except for whenever they're permitted to go to what they call the dog run, which is another isolated enclosure, 20-foot high walls covered over by plexiglass, and they are allowed to exercise perhaps an hour or 45 minutes a day, and with no ball, nothing, no equipment whatsoever, and no company. So there are no phone calls allowed out of the shoe, none. And visits are restricted to about an hour, which is whittled down to about 45 minutes after you go through all the security, and only on weekends and holidays. So these are the draconian conditions under which Hugo Pinel and other political prisoners are being held in a total of 60 Supermax prisons. And before I did this latest research, I recalled a figure of about 36 Supermax prisons patterned after the original one built in 1983 in Marion, Illinois, which had a notorious reputation. And then Pelican Bay, of course, was built in '89, and countless others have followed since. And now there are 60 Supermax prisons, and that's not even accounting all of the Supermax type units that are part of segregation in maximum security, not Supermax, but maximum security prisons. There are several levels of prison. There are the playgrounds that the rich people go to, minimum security prisons, and then you have regular overcrowded prisons, and then you have maximum security prisons and Supermax. And of course, as you probably well know by now, there are upwards of 2.5 million prisoners nationwide. In California, that figure hovers around 170,000. However, if you add all of the prisoners who are on probation, parole, or some other kind of leash, like the ankle bracelet thing, house arrest, then the figure jumps to over 7 million. Okay, I think I heard a statistic: 1 out of every 100 adults in the United States is in prison. So, and I think the figure goes to 1 out of every 15 black men has been in prison. And now the figures are just through the roof. And of course, most of the prisoners are black and brown. And while a lot of these prisons are getting very, very cheap labor vis-a-vis the prison industrial complex, a lot of them are just warehouses.